comments. We have two opportunities for that during the meeting, one at the beginning of the meeting, and then one towards the end after any of the information we've provided has sparked some comments regarding that process. We are very much a community-driven group. We are receptive to and appreciative, quite frankly, of the comments of the folks that are members of our Wildwood community and enjoy Town Center, and also are looking forward to the future Town Center. So, having said that, if you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, we'll get started. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ordinarily, Dr. Terry Jones from the University of Missouri would be our facilitator and moderator. Unfortunately, he's not here this evening, so we're going to do the best we can. So, having said that, the first item on the agenda is welcome and remarks from myself. And also, we have the draft minutes. And does everyone have the draft minutes? So, Mr. Vunich, are you ready for us to go forward with the live stream?
Yes, sir. I think I have it on, and hopefully if it isn't, someone will text me from somewhere and let me know I've failed in my first task. The minutes you just received today, so if there is an uncomfortableness amongst the team members to act upon them, we can delay that and do it at our next meeting in the new year.
Thank you. I did have a chance to review them. I found them to be consistent with what we discussed last time and in order, but I will defer or seek a motion if anybody has an interest in approving them, or we can certainly postpone them till next meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I make a motion.
Do we have a second? Second by Dan. Do we need to do a roll call for minute approval? Do all those in favor of approving the minutes from the November meeting say aye? Aye. Opposed? Nay was Stephen. And any abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay.
Abstain.
Deborah abstains. And who else was it?
I missed the last meeting, so I'll abstain from the minutes.
So Niles and Deb.
Just received it. So that's fine.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. So I think we have enough of a vote to approve the minutes from last meeting, and they'll be approved, marked as such, and we will move forward. Next item on the agenda is public comments. I believe Ms. Gaston has the cards, or do I have the cards? Or
I have the cards. The first speaker is Bill McLaney.
That was a good effort.
Thank you. Please state your name and your address.
Name is Bill McLaney,
McLaney.
153 Meadows of Wildwood. My wife and I have been residents here in Wildwood for the past 9 years, and those 9 years were over at the Meadows of Wildwood. What I wanted to speak to mainly was, since we've been living here, the extension of Generations Drive has come up a number of times in our development. And in talking to most of the people that I've talked to over there, they all agree it should happen. If we look at what it was 9 years ago, the YMCA was a lot smaller in attendance than it is today. The junior college didn't grow as much as it has recently. And the commercial center here, there's an awful lot more business there. You see the parking lot filled quite often. Based on that, the traffic that went across that road was a lot less than it is today. It's getting much more use. And I think one of the biggest concerns that a lot of us have is there's really only one exit entrance over there. The other road, you can't really get in there, and you can only get out going south. So only having one entrance exit is kind of limiting to us, especially at certain points during the day, especially when the junior college is leaving at noon. That exit gets quite crowded, and the light is rather short getting out. So you can sit there at least through two light switches before you can get out. So the need to expand Generations Drive all the way over to Manchester Road, I think is absolutely necessary. I support it wholly. The other thing that I just want to make a comment about is the cultural section. I think we ought to continue to enforce that, leave it alone. I think it's perfect the way it is. Thank you.
Excuse me. Miss Susan Dustman?
Thank you. A lot of my comments are going to be the same as Bill's, but my name is Susan Dutzman. I'm a resident at the Meadows of Wildwood, and I've lived in Wildwood for over 30 years. So I'm very familiar with the development and growth of this community since its inception. My family moved to Wildwood because of the open green spaces and the idea of not living in a cookie-cutter, overcrowded neighborhood. Wildwood's a vibrant, beautiful place to live, and I'm here today to lend my voice to those in the community who want to preserve the initial concept and vision that I think most Wildwood residents want to keep. Number 5 on the agenda tonight is the discussion of the extension of Generations Drive, which, like Bill, I believe is necessary and critically important. Generations Drive is a very short 2-lane road used by 64 residences at the Meadows, over 2,000 students at the community college, approximately 2,500 members and staff at the YMCA, in addition to all the traffic coming in and out of the Wildwood businesses across from the YMCA. There's only one way in and out of these destinations, with the exception of a right-hand turn on Turkey Track towards Eureka. The traffic exiting our community, the college, the YMCA, and these businesses can back up for extended periods of time, especially for those who are trying to make a left turn towards Manchester Road. The extension of Generations Drive to Manchester and the addition of an additional exit would help to alleviate this congestion. But I would ask the council, in addition to discussing the extension of Generations Drive, to also review the traffic going in and out of the community college. Some of the students disregard all safety precautions. I personally have almost been hit by drivers racing in and out of the college, and many people I know have had the same experience more than once. Perhaps speed bumps could be considered on the college entrances and exits when a traffic study is implemented. I'd also like to add a brief comment regarding number 6 on the agenda, the regulating plan and land use activities. It's my understanding there are 2 parcels of land remaining in the town center that are zoned for cultural institutional use, and I would ask the council in their deliberations to not allow these parcels to be rezoned for any type of housing. In my opinion, to best serve the Wildwood community, these properties with the current cultural institutional zoning classification should be developed as park and open spaces, wildlife, and scenic areas. Wildwood needs to retain these last 2 green spaces for the enjoyment of the entire community. Thank you.
Chair Loyal, we have one more comment, but he wishes to refrain to the later section for public comment. Thank you.
Next on the agenda, I'd ask for Director Vunich to give us an outline of the inclusion item in our packets, I believe, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the team. As you know, tonight we have several items on our agenda for consideration. Those items relate to the reference Generation Drive, which is next to be considered. Thereafter, the next two items relate to the regulating plan, the land use map of our town center, and then the corresponding or associated list of activities associated with each of those land use categories identified on the regulating plan. In support of those items on the agenda, Ms. Gaston and I have prepared for you a series of maps that specifically identify some of the locations we'll be discussing tonight, such as the one that's on your screens and projected behind the dais. We also have provided you the updated information regarding the decision-making process of this team and the decisions that have been made, the votes associated with it, and the time frame as well. And then we have updated the timeline, which we do for each of our meetings. And as you can see, we've pushed ourselves out into the latter part of spring, early summer of 2020. Part of that rationale is that eventually, when the plan is in draft form, we will need to have public input, and we do intend to have at least 2, if not 3, open houses or some type of public input session, so as individuals both in town center and from the remainder of the community will have an opportunity to comment on the work of this particular group. Also, there have been a couple of items that were provided to the team outside, let's say, the Department of Planning. One came from one of the team members, Councilmember Stevens, regarding several items he would like to discuss at a future meeting. And certainly we can add those to the agenda with the permission of the chair and undertake those in January if that's acceptable. If not, certainly whenever the team feels it's appropriate. And then tonight at your chairs, we did provide you some public comment that was received as well. And that information, as I say, came to us later than the preparation of the agenda and its posting. So a lot of information tonight. Hopefully we'll make sense out of it for you as we present it. But certainly if there are any questions or comments during the presentations, don't hesitate. And Terry and I are available for any comments or questions now regarding the packet. Thank you.
The first item will be the discussion of regarding the extension of Generations Drive from New College Avenue to Manchester Road. I had asked that Mr. Vudish put this on the agenda after hearing discussion from a number of members of our community. I think it's worth mentioning that we have discussed this previously, early in our process, early this past spring. So the team itself was very much aware of the potential for Generations Drive, or I'm assuming Drive and Avenue are used interchangeable, or not? Probably.
Well, if you are the postal delivery person, you would say Generations Avenue, but certainly Generations is fine for our purposes tonight.
Thank you. But and if you would, Mr. Vudish, if you would give us some historical background on where we went in the process and also kind of where the entire process is and how we got to this point.
And again, I know Ms. Broyles, one of our team members, identified this as an item for the agenda, so I don't want to spend too much time. But there are a couple of items I would like to identify, then I'll yield the podium and I'll only speak if spoken to from that point forward. Just to give you some background, New College Avenue, west of Route 109 and Generations Drive, was a collaborative effort. It was just not the city that constructed those two particular town center streets. The owner of Wildwood Square at the time, a gentleman named Tom McLean, the Wildwood Family YMCA, the community college, Mike McNerney, the original developer of Meadows of Wildwood community, and the city all participated. Some provided not only dedications, the land area for the right-of-way and streets, but also money for the construction. And ultimately, those 5 parties were able to create the street network, for the most part, that has served the area for a number of years. The statistics the one speaker provided at the public participation section earlier tonight certainly, I think, are accurate. The Wildwood Family YMCA has seen growth. I understand the community college is busting at the seams in their single building, and certainly the completion of Meadows of Wildwood and, for the most part, Wildwood Square have all put pressure on the system of streets. Acknowledging that, the Town Center Update team in March and April, spent a great deal of time talking about the traffic analysis that was completed by H.R. Green of the entirety of Town Center, which was inclusive of this particular area. The process, much of which was initiated by Mr. Roughton, one of our team members, in terms of a format, ended up with a spreadsheet. And in that spreadsheet, we did some prioritization, assignment of points, and ultimately came up with a hierarchy of priority road improvements that would be forwarded to the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council to be discussed and hopefully included in the 5-year capital improvement plan, and then in the appropriate year, the capital improvements budget. So in April, we identified 7 priority roads or streets in Town Center. And this is in order of priority: Center Avenue, Etherton Road from Manchester Road to the Canberry subdivision, State Route 109, which is nearing completion or is to be completed in May of 2020, Taylor Road Extension, which is complete, West Avenue, Generations Drive, and then Wildwood Avenue. So, Mr. Chair and members of the team, we have identified it as one of the top 7 priorities for the city of Wildwood over the course of the next term of the plan, which is a 10-year cycle. Saying that, again, our assignments of points and the rankings certainly were done with all due diligence. But if the team would like to review any or all portions of those top 7 streets or roads, we can certainly do that at a future meeting. I would hope it wouldn't take as much time as it took to get to this point with our hierarchy, but certainly we can look at those 7 streets or any of them if there are requested changes. So by a vote of 15-0, the team adopted those 7 streets as priorities. Mr. Chair and members of the team, if there are any questions of the department, we'd be glad to try to answer them at this time, Terry and I.
Joe, so some of my questions I had you kind of touched upon a little bit, but do you happen to remember what the traffic study determination was regarding New College Avenue and Generations Drive?
The traffic study did state that Generations Drive needed to extend to Manchester Road. There are 2 options. The first option and the original option is shown on the screens and on the wall behind the dais. That's that blue line that Ms. Gaston transcribed onto it. That particular extension of Generations Drive would be triggered by the construction of a second building on the community college campus. And until such time, there is no manner or method to encourage or require that construction. Knowing that and unsure of the enrollment growth at the community college, the city also has been collecting right-of-way along just a straight extension from the current terminus north of Manchester Road. And we do have right-of-way across a portion of that area. We are -1 property to complete the right-of-way. And then we would also have to negotiate with the community college for additional area on their side or on their property.
And then one of the speakers mentioned speed issues. So I know there's stop signs through there, but maybe if we added a electrical light, signal light in there somewhere in the middle, do you think that would help?
I think the consistent complaint I've heard from the residents of Meadows of Wildwood is the community college access point at Generations Drive, there's just a stop sign posted on, I believe, a street light. And oftentimes that stop sign isn't adhered to by the students, staff, or faculty leaving the community college campus. I think we could work with the community college to see if there's some things we can do on site to better inform the drivers that they are entering into a stop area and that the cross traffic is not required to stop. So I'd like to tackle that first before adding an electric signal, a traffic signal, because they're expensive to install, and then there's the electrical charges and just maintenance and things like that.
Okay, and then do you happen to know what the waiting time is at the light going out onto 109? Because I know we've got that issue with Brightleaf.
Yes, and as with any state route, priority is given to traffic on the state route. So the span of the signal operation favors the arterial road versus the secondary road. I do not know, but that's something we can find out for all of you and have it at the next meeting. Good question. Thank you.
Uh-huh. I'm just looking at my notes to make sure I hit them all. Sorry. Okay, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am.
I haven't timed it, Deborah, but I go that way. My office is right there. It's short. The residents are right. I mean, maybe 4 cars get through to make that left. And especially if that first car's not paying attention, you might get 2 cars to make that left. So I completely understand where the couple of public comment speakers mentioned from over at the Meadows of Wildwood. I also have a couple of clients that we insure over there in Meadows of Wildwood, and we've gotten kind of similar complaints with the college and the students that are 19, 20, 21, and stop signs are suggestions, I think, to them, so maybe some speed bumps might not be a bad idea. The reason I had a question, though, Joe, was you said number 7 on the traffic study, or what we had approved. What was the timeline on this project being completed compared to the other road constructions that we had talked about? I didn't have it in my notes.
We had it at 10 plus years. Obviously, we probably need to take a look at that. Some were now, others, as I've mentioned, are nearing completion. So we can adjust this probably based upon just what's happened since our first meeting approximately a year ago. Taylor Road Extension has been accepted by the city. That's complete. State Route 109 will be complete based upon being ahead of schedule now in May sometime of 2020. So we can certainly adjust these and look at that. And if that's a task the team would like the department to undertake, we could do that for you. Just give an explanation of where we are with the 7 and see if we would like to revise it before it's finalized.
And then, Joe, I have a quick follow-up question. With the new roundabouts on 109 and taking those traffic signals out at 100 and 109, that's going to, thus far I've seen, and it's only been Monday and Tuesday, again, because my office is right at the corner of New College Avenue and 109, that the traffic is just kind of migrating south. So now we're getting a little bit more backup at New College Avenue and down there at Manchester because that's where the traffic signals are at. Would we want to postpone any decision on extending Generations Drive until we could have a true traffic study with those completion of those roundabouts?
I will verify this, but I think the H.R. Green traffic analysis of Town Center took into account the completion of the roundabouts at the interchange of Route 109 and Route 100. So what I would probably suggest is if we return back to this discussion about Generations Drive, the roundabouts, the timing, I'll have our Director of Public Works at the next available meeting, if it's January, with the concurrence of the chair and the team members, and we can go back through that if you'd like. Yes, ma'am.
I didn't think I had my microphone on. All right. So I think that could be a possibility to talk with the college about either moving the sign. I don't know where they can move the sign because you don't want to move it up because then it would really block it. But I have heard and I have had to honk my horn several times to encourage those students to stop because they think we're going to turn into the college. They don't realize we're going to go straight. Same thing happens when we leave. We have less trouble there leaving, going north on College Avenue, not New College Avenue, but Generations Drive. So I think that's maybe a point that maybe moving the sign up, the stop sign nearer the top, and then they can see us possibly. The other thing I wanted to mention, and I'm glad you gave the timeline on Generations Drive, and that was 10 years. Is that correct, Joe?
Yes, we had it at 10 plus years.
And then you changed it back to 10? Or is it still 10 plus?
We had 10 plus. That was the last 3 of the top 7 all had 10 plus years in terms of best estimate when improvement is needed. And again, that was premised on the traffic analysis done by H.R. Green.
And you spoke about this earlier, and that is the straight road, straight over to Manchester Road, and I didn't realize that that was a possibility. Can you show that again, where that is, to the audience and to us?
So in Wildwood Square, the second expansion, we required the dedication there along that property. I believe we have about 13 so feet dedicated for the future. The remainder would come from the other side. I think this is the college. This is that intervening piece of ground we thought would be developed as part of the overall plan. Just the road through from highway. We reached out to different properties over the course of time and asked them about the likelihood of dedicating that, pre-dedicating it before development. And certainly they'd be glad to sell it to us, but no one was willing to donate it.
The development of the road or the development of this Payne property that we've been talking about?
That corner area has been the location of a proposed commercial center. And that actually got pretty far into the process, a site development plan, and I believe the Architectural Review Board looked at some of the different buildings associated with the site. And then CVS, the pharmacy, was looking at the location. And again, the Architectural Review Board did a courtesy review of the building and sent it back with some not so positive comments, and we haven't seen them either for a bit as well.
And lastly, I'd like to comment on Mike's issue about safety. And I know that at the November 5th meeting with the mayor's coffee, this was brought up, and Rick Brown, Public Works, said that he would talk to MoDOT about changing the timing on that light there at 109 and New College Avenue. And likewise, if you're lucky if you get 4 cars through there. And sometimes there'll be a couple of cars behind me that I know must have hit a red light. And I think there's a real definite safety issue there.
As I say, we've been told multiple times by representatives from the state that preferential timing is given to the state route versus any adjoining or intersecting side streets. So we'll do our best to see if we can get an answer and get something on paper so you all can see it from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I have the HR Green traffic impact study, and it's listed number 13 or something on here. But it says a future roadway connection of Generations Drive to the north should tie in to the future Main Street connection at Manchester Road, west of 109. This future connection would provide better quality and give motorists an alternate route from south and west to the east.
That's the blue line.
Yeah, and that's the blue line. So I would just caution against changing any of the street network to make it go straight through, because if we're planning for the future in a 10 year out, 20 year out, having Generations Drive connect with a future Main Street, and also having a Main Street that is more of a boulevard rather than the reserve plan, that will go a long way to helping traffic flow. It's one of the tenets of new urbanism is the interconnectivity of the street network. And also the streets are going to come with sidewalks, so it's going to be an interconnectivity of sidewalks to get you around the city. So I like the little hook there better than going straight through to Manchester Road. So is the list of priorities, Generations Drive, it is this plan, correct? It's not the connection straight through, is it?
It could be either. We didn't differentiate. And part of the reason we didn't differentiate, and we have a plan B, which is the northerly straight connection, is that we weren't sure with how the growth of the community college would proceed. And they've also been clear that with the defeat of I think it was the cigarette tax, that state funding continues to dwindle, and they're just faced with some budgetary issues. And so from that perspective, the thought of having to wait on the community college to address a traffic problem in Wildwood, we needed to have a plan B. The preference to the community college plan is they pay for it. No one else does. So that's to the benefit of the taxpayers and the city of Wildwood.
Okay. Yeah, I would just much prefer to have that plan for the interconnectivity of the streets versus the straight shot through. So, and I think the straight shot through would also, if you got a problem with speeders now, if you have a straight shot all the way through there to Manchester Road, you're just increasing the likelihood of people getting up to high levels of speed going through there. So, thank you.
Point taken, sir. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Terry's done an accurate job of kind of aligning the blue line that she created and added to the image to the overlay of the proposed reserve project. And there is an intent for a roundabout there, not at the scale that we see on State Route 109 today, but more like at Taylor Road and Manchester Road, more here toward this end of town center. So certainly, as I say, development is going to, I guess, lead a lot of these road improvements based upon certain budgetary issues the city's experiencing. The concern I think H.R. Green expressed regarding the more direct extension, let's say, of Generations Drive to Manchester Road is there's a real stacking issue associated with the bus lot at certain times during the day in that left turn lane, so they can go north on Route 109. And the stacking, at least the assessment of the stacking of the buses and other vehicles would block that access point. And so that's never a good situation. So that's why I think they favored the other. But we'll check on that too. It is in the agreement that was formulated between the 5 parties to build New College Avenue west of Route 109 and Generations Drive that serves now, obviously, the community college in Meadows of Wildwood. So yeah, we don't necessarily control our own destiny. That's why, again, we went with the Plan B. Plan B may just be Plan B. It's not the best plan, but certainly if an opportunity were to come along, maybe it's an option that makes available and relieves some of the concerns about emergency access, a single access point to a very busy area, etc.
Joe, just to piggyback a little bit off of what you said there, so that little hook that you got from Generations where it stops right there at New College Avenue around the pond, that's community college property, correct?
All of it is. There's a little neck that is that northern extension of it up to Manchester Road. That's their access strip.
So even if we say, hey, this is great, let's go with this, if the college says, well, no, the original agreement was not till we build the second building, or no, we want nothing to do with the road, doesn't matter, kind of to Elizabeth's point, correct?
Exactly.
That's why you designed Plan B to go straight through to Manchester, which you have a little bit more control over.
Well, and part of the reason is we had Wildwood Square develop, and we were able to obtain the right-of-way immediately. And secondly, we thought that corner, that southwest corner at Manchester Road and Route 109 was going to develop. So that seemed like it was going to happen much sooner. Obviously, things have changed, and it hasn't. But I think at the end of the day, whatever becomes available will make the decision I think that's best for the residents.
Joe, just one question, or I would ask you to talk to Rick, and I think it's a good idea that we update or at least reevaluate our priority list. Obviously, some of the projects have been completed. Reestablish what remains valid on the list. Provide this group an opportunity to either confirm or alter the priorities. And also, if you could update us on, I had a very brief conversation with the city administrator who said he had recently met with the chancellor, curator, or somebody at the community college regarding their future plans, and he seemed to think that they may have changed a bit since even the last time we discussed it. So if we can get an update on that, that may impact how we prioritize our recommendations to P&Z in the future.
Well, we'll certainly, I'll invite Rick Brown if it's acceptable. If you want to tackle this in January, we can do it at that meeting, and I can try my best to have Mr. Brown available. He knows it. He's a PTOE, a professional traffic operating engineer, so he sleeps this stuff. I don't. It's all a learning curve to me, so I'd be glad to get him here for that. And certainly, one other item, Councilmember Stevens identified the Main Street extension from here at the terminus of City Hall west to Etherton Road as one of his 3 priorities he'd like to be discussed. So kind of reevaluating this will give us that opportunity as well.
The only thing I would say about the January timing is I'd like to see how far we get in looking at the land use category. I hate to get this in the middle of something
Sure.
and then divert back and have Rick sitting here and we don't get to him. So perhaps at the end of this evening's meeting, we'll have a better handle on whether we'll be able to get to him in January or whether we need to push him just to February, something like that.
Well said, sir.
Thank you very much. Terry, go ahead.
I got one point. The proposed location. Doesn't look like really.
It's intended to. Yep. So, when the community college developed their first building, we actually required a 50-foot wide dedication on that little neck up at Manchester Road. Now, subsequent to that, the Rockwood School District entered into a lease with the community college to build that additional parking area. So as Terry and I were talking today, that access road needs to be to the to the east of the parking area and to the west of the boundary line. But they'll align. If we don't align them, you should fire me. Thank you, sir. Good advice. That's true, but that's a pretty big one if we miss that, and you deservedly should.
Thank you, Joe. Mike.
I got one more quick question, Joe. On that little nook around the pond, on the where I guess you call it the 90-degree angle, do you know if the community college, if you went that route, would they want that as another entry point to the community college? Is that something you could offer to them that might alleviate some of the traffic on Generations to say, hey, build a road from here to here so that way your students can get in and out?
I would give them every logical reason to proceed now, not wait. But again, it's all about funding. And then in the end, we'd have to amend the agreement we signed many years ago, because again, in the agreement, we made the stipulation we wouldn't require any improvements until such time as the second building began. I think they would love to have a second access point just as much as anyone else in the room. I think it's just a matter of funding.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And for our guests in the audience, I know that this perhaps doesn't answer all of your questions, but hopefully it has brought you up to speed on where we're at in that discussion process. The information you provided has been very helpful, and as we revisit our priorities that we established last spring, your input will be extremely important in that decision-making process, so thank you. The next item on the agenda, which I think ties into our guests this evening as well, is beginning our discussion regarding the regulating plan and land use activities for the categories in Town Center. I've asked Mr. Vunich if we could start with cultural and institutional, because we were aware of the fact that there'd be some interest this evening on what was going on with Generations Drive, and obviously the cultural institutional classification is very much in your hearts and minds as well. So, Joe, if we could start with that.
Certainly, sir. To give you some, again, background on the Cultural Institutional Overlay District, it's a bit of a sordid history, so I'll try to choose my words appropriately. There was an interest in developing a retirement community where now the Meadows of Wildwood is located. At that time, that property and the properties around it were designated non-urban residential area by the master plan. What that meant is you could have a retirement community, and if it was basically licensed by the state of Missouri based upon the number of permitted beds, you could have 100 people live in a building. Otherwise, if you were looking at independent care or assisted care, the density of those units would be premised more so on 1 unit for every 3 acres. Well, Meadows of Wildwood is approximately on 18 acres, so you could have 6 independent care units. That wasn't workable. The mayor at that time thought that that was inappropriate, and this particular site was preferential. So he made the statement at one point that one way or another, we're going to have a retirement community here. And ultimately, the charge was handed to the Planning and Zoning Commission to figure out a way to make it work. Therefore, the Cultural Institutional Overlay District. We brought all the properties into Town Center. We created something that, for the most part, was to be kind of a complementary set of uses, meaning more institutional, not necessarily commercial, and certainly not all residential. And so from that perspective, I think it's been fairly successful. We have the Wildwood Family YMCA, we have the community college, we have a, pardon my expression, age-restricted community. We have 2 churches, we have a school. So all in all, it's done pretty well, and it's preserved the non-urban resident area of the master plan from inappropriate use by basically calling some residential developments senior care facilities. We also have designated City Hall as Cultural Institutional Overlay District, and then the Metro West Fire Protection District Station and headquarters. So as you can see, we've used it judiciously, and I think we've used it well to accommodate, for the most part, what's happening in the area and what we hope to see in the future. So I think the question that is being asked is, there is an interest in the 5-acre site immediately south of the Wildwood Family YMCA. It is owned by the community college. It's separated from the community college's remaining property by Generations Avenue, and for all intents and purposes represents more of an outlot than anything else to the community college. The interest is by a multiple family developer. The developer is headquartered out of Northwest Arkansas and has done a number of projects across the country, none to my knowledge here in the St. Louis area. This coming Monday night, a group of individuals, the mayor, the 2 council representatives representing this particular area, Ward 1, the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the city council liaison to the Planning Commission will hold a Development and Zoning Review Committee meeting. It's an informal meeting. Public comment isn't accepted. It's just an opportunity for the developer to present to those key decision makers the idea behind the development concept, to take feedback and use that feedback either to proceed forward with an improved project or basically to take the time and make a decision if it's reasonable or not. I will say, and I know most of the residents in Meadows of Wildwood, either by face or name, when the Cultural Institutional Overlay District was formulated, we did talk about multiple family units being authorized there. We thought it might be a complement to the community college, allowing for some student housing, but also more so just for young people, those that are first married or empty nesters, in that they would have great access to educational, recreational facilities in walking distance, i.e. the community college, the Wildwood Family YMCA, and Rockwoods Reservation. It's not to say that all multiple family projects are created equal. Certainly, we've established a high bar in that location with the Meadows of Wildwood, and we would expect anyone that would want to develop a residential use there of a multiple family nature to exceed that bar that's been established.
I just have a question regarding the classifications in the housing section for that. The other 2 require a conditional use permit, but multifamily is permissible already. I'd be interested in how that dynamic worked. That multifamily was allowed already, but the other one required a conditional use permit.
Again, just remember that the principal or the primary use in that portion of the Cultural Institutional Overlay District is the community college. Originally 66 acres, purchased an additional 77 acres, so has roughly about 140 acres of ground, and at one time had a concept plan that showed up to 5 or 6 different buildings located just on the 66-acre parcel of ground. So it's more the dog wagging the tail. What's the primary use and what would complement the primary use? And in this case, as I say, we thought recreational facilities, some commercial, which is in the workplace district, and certainly multiple family.
Right, I was just curious about 2 of the housing classification require conditional use permit, but the other was already permissible. Why wasn't it also conditional use? I'm just curious about the dynamic.
Again, back then we thought it was a complementary use and would be something that would benefit the cultural institutional overlay district more so than not.
Mr. Vunich, could you show on the map where this property is that you're speaking of?
So it has frontage on Generations Avenue, Turkey Track Road, Route 109, and then the town boundary.
And so they are wanting to put multi-family residential there. That's what they're looking to do, and currently it's permitted by this. I'm just trying to make sure I'm up to speed.
Be careful with the word permitted. That's probably one of the things we'll talk about. It
Well,
doesn't mean it's permitted by right. It's a permitted use, but has to be authorized.
Okay.
Meaning that we don't give away all of our checks and balances if the project's too dense, if the project doesn't meet the architectural guidelines, if the project doesn't meet the neighborhood design standards. It doesn't mean it's permitted by right. It's just something that can be considered without the benefit of a conditional use permit.
Okay, so on this piece of paper here that I'm looking at, under housing, under multifamily residential, under the cultural institutional, there's a P. It says uses permitted by right.
That's not necessarily correct.
Okay, so but I read it correctly. Okay.
You read it correctly,
Okay.
but it's never been interpreted as such
Okay.
because we would not want a project to come forward and say, I'm permitted by right, you have to accept it. No, we do everything in town center by site-specific ordinance, which gives us that latitude to judge a project on its merits, not just because it's the right use.
Okay, so then my next question, and these are just all for my own clarification, would be that for the sake of this conversation, they wanted to put a multifamily thing there. Then doesn't that just kind of add to the back of this Generations Avenue traffic problem? Because it seems to me that that's the only access point, and so now you're dumping more traffic onto an already existing traffic problem?
Yes. Obviously, not all the units will be available immediately, so there'll be a gradual increase in traffic, but an increase in traffic. So there's a couple of things that the departments of Public Works and Planning, along with the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council, will look at. First of all, we will require a traffic generation assessment fee be applied to all of the units, the individual units. It's a one-time payment, but it's a payment that is then used for off-site roadway improvements. I say that because the city, based upon previous court precedents, cannot require a developer on that 5 acres to build the northern extension of Generations Drive. It's an off-site improvement. The courts have said if you want it, build it yourself. You can't ask the developer to do it because they don't have a common boundary or frontage. So we'll get the traffic generation assessment fee, and depending on the number of units, that'll be in the tens of thousands, if not $100,000 plus dollars. Not enough to build the road, because again, we don't have the right of way, and the road will probably be more expensive than that. That's just my assessment. The question becomes, if we work with the developer, would he be willing to consider doing off-site improvements? And what incentives can we provide? Just the same situation as we did with Wildwood Square, the community college, Meadows of Wildwood, the Wildwood Family YMCA. We partnered with a group to defray all of the cost to each of them, but collectively be able to build the required improvements and not wait for the development cycle to catch up.
Joe, any estimates on number of residents in that 5 acres?
Well, the discussions I've had with the development entity, they're 1 and 2 bedroom. The majority are, I believe, 1 bedroom. And I want to say it's in the 150 range.
And then my second question would be...
But don't hold me to that.
No, would there be a potential benefit to the community college negotiation with the city, with the builder, and with the community college that you want to sell that land, but we're already constrained from a traffic perspective? Would that help the community college push them in the direction of that new road?
I think that question needs to be asked of the parties. Here's the situation. You're profiting from the sale, St. Louis Community College. The developer, if approved by the city, will have a project that they believe will be profitable. So from that perspective, can't we work together to address a known problem relative to certain traffic conditions during portions of the day?
And the city may even go on record as saying we don't want to add any additional traffic. We have to update the road if you desire to sell this property.
So what we will ask of the developer is to do not a overall traffic study or analysis of town center, but to look at the impact of his project on that set of immediate roads. If that comes back and says that service levels are at D and F, or the queuing for turning movements at Route 109 and New College Avenue are such that they are at D and F or unsafe, which is F, at least from my perspective, then that's justification to not support the project. I mean, again, you don't want to create an unsafe situation. That's contrary to the charge cities have.
Okay, thank you.
Well, certainly, with the permission here, Mr. Doyle driving 50 used to be through its junkyard. McBride and Son Homes submitted a proposal for the development of about 35 to 38 home sites. On that, the proposal obviously was for single-family detached homes, which was a conditional use, not only requiring a site-specific ordinance, but the issuance of a permit as part of it. And the project didn't move forward for a lot of reasons, but principally, I think it was a design that wasn't new urbanism, and it was a use that didn't complement the other activities in the cultural institutional overlay district, because it wasn't targeted towards students. It wasn't targeted necessarily to those demographics we had looked at early on and said this might be a good place. So ultimately they withdrew it because the Planning and Zoning Commission was not favorable, at least during the public hearing process, about the outcome. Pardon, ma'am?
I add one more thing about the Planning and Zoning Commission. They actually unanimously, in May, I believe, of 2017, rejected unanimously that they were not going to change the zoning there and giving them a conditional use permit. Am I correct?
I believe that was the case. I remember a report was written by the department. Your memory's better than I, but congratulations to our commission members.
Yes, congratulations.
Joe, just for purposes of clarification, that meeting on Monday, is it here at City Hall?
Yes.
And it's a public meeting, but it's not it's open to the public, but it's not a hearing type of meeting.
No, there'll be a hearing where everybody will get their opportunity to see the plan, review the specifics, and provide comments. It's not intended to stifle conversation. This is, again, it's a process that was formulated just to give those 5 individuals and the developer an opportunity just to exchange ideas. The public's welcome, but there is no public comment section. The department really doesn't even do anything. We just sit there and listen as well.
Thank you. Niles?
I know for some of the residents that are probably in the Meadows of Wildwood, they believe everything around there should probably be green space, right? Because that's permitted in the cultural institutional district. That's what we love in Wildwood. But I guess is multifamily, I mean, is that an appropriate usage for this type of property when you're looking at it in terms of new urbanism and what the original intent for a town center design was whenever the city was incorporated?
You know, if I had all the authority, all the land use authority in the world and could kind of conjure up some things, the two things I'd like to see in town center that we lack are more commercial areas, vibrant commercial areas like we have here at Taylor Road and Main Street, and probably a couple of multiple family projects. Again, a lot of people add a connotation to multiple family, but I'm sure that at one point or another, almost everybody in this room's lived in an apartment, either during college or right after college or when first married. And now what we're seeing is a real move of a demographic, the seniors into apartments because they split time elsewhere in Florida, Arizona, and other locations. So if done correctly, and if the appropriate protections are put in place, a multiple family and can be a vibrant use, a good use in town center.
Right, and then if done correctly, is I guess that's the big key. But I also think that you're seeing a lot of the younger generation now. They're taking a little bit longer to buy that first home, and some of them are just choosing to rent. So there's a lot of young professionals that don't want to tie themselves into a permanent housing situation, and they want to be more mobile. And if you have to add, or you don't have to, if you were going to add multifamily housing anywhere in Wildwood, I think the downtown district and some places around here that are already more dense and have services that are around them, I think it's a good use. So I would support it.
Well, thank you for your comments, and point taken again.
Oh, I just need some clarification. So what are cleaning and pickup stations?
Those are ones that do not clean the clothing at the location. Generally, a van or a truck comes by, picks up the cleaning, takes it to the cleaning plant, and then returns it. So it's just a station where you drop off and pick up, and none of the cleaning is done there.
Okay, and then can you clarify for me, on here it has recreational facilities, including indoor theaters and outdoor activities. And then right below that says recreational facilities, no indoor theater or outdoor activities. I'm having trouble.
Well, the best way I can explain the first one is the downtown district. Without the downtown district in that particular use, we would not have B&B theater. So in downtown district, we allow the most intense land uses. And again, movie theaters are considered such because at certain points during the day, they can overwhelm an area, particularly if they have multiple screens and what they're showing is popular. In terms of the workplace district, again, you have to remember that the design standards also control some of the land use. In the workplace district, footprints are limited to 10,000 square feet, whereas in downtown district, it's 40,000 square feet. So theaters are generally not going to fit that footprint, typically. What are recreational uses that might fall into that category? It could be something like a standalone indoor batting cage, things like that, where you see kids, adults, whatever the age may be, going there. Could be indoor soccer or something like that. We've had interest from an indoor soccer, from an individual for an indoor soccer practice field. It was down on Manchester Road where Cross Oil used to be. Never came to fruition, but that's, I guess, what I would use.
Okay, so basically it's either or allowed, correct?
Recreational uses of certain recreational uses are allowed in the downtown and workplace district. The differentiation occurs when their intensity or their size changes.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Chair. Okay. Is it our intent tonight to delete some of these things on these categories
Well, actually, that was good.
and or add some?
Exactly. I guess the first thing I'd like to do in specific to this land use classification, which is cultural institutional, is ask, first off, from the department, are there any areas within town center where you would recommend that we expand to be included in cultural institutional?
Not to my knowledge. Again, it's as you can see on the map, there are a couple of locations that are shown in red that are churches. But during the development of the original plan and the update, those church facilities wanted to retain a higher land use category because from their perspective, they're not sure what's going to happen around them, or if they expand and grow, their facility may not accommodate that level of growth. And so they see it as an investment for the future. So at this stage, the department would not recommend any changes to the cultural institutional overlay district in terms of expanding or contracting it.
Okay, and likewise, members of the team, do any of us have a thought regarding either expanding or contracting the cultural institutional district? Elizabeth?
I think contracting, if you're talking about taking away, I can't imagine on those two pieces of property that are left in cultural institutional that there would be cemeteries and mausoleums.
But that's use classification. What I'm looking at now is just to determine if there's any other areas within town center that we should give that designation to or take it from. And then I would hope that once we get determined on that, we can go through the individual use classification, see which remains about that or top of any of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chair, it's really two parts, the regulating plan, and then we'll talk about the list of uses. And I was going to give you a little background of how we might tackle that, and certainly it's not the only way, and we could amend that as inputs provided.
Okay, so I think, Niles, go ahead.
Joe. What about subtracting the Pruitt property out of town center in general, since it's on the borderline there? It's not. There's not a whole lot of uses for that property because of the topography and stuff. What would be the pros, cons, yes, nos about that?
What
The Pruitt property on the south, yes, right there.
Well, just alone on its history as a unlicensed illegal junkyard, you would always have a question about what's left. Now, McBride & Son Homes, they did a phase 1 environmental assessment and a phase 2 environmental assessment. I think they did almost 50 test holes. They found a lot of junk, but nothing that would be what would be considered toxic or hazardous in terms of substances. At least that's what the report says. If there is one property in the cultural institutional overlay district that I would struggle to say that's a good use there, that's it.
And if we were to remove that from the towns, it would be a boundary adjustment, correct? And just remove it from the town center, it would go back to non-urban 3 acre. I would make that motion to go ahead and adjust the boundary to remove that property from the town center and take it back to a non-urban 3 acre density.
So you're making that motion?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? I think we need.
If you get a second, yeah, then you can open up for discussion.
Yeah. We have to have a second so we can have a discussion.
We could have a discussion without a second. I mean, it's already been brought up.
Okay,
Just For
By all means.
normal parliamentary procedure, you would normally have a second in order to have it discussed. If it's not of interest to the team, no big deal. I was just offering it.
Yes, the chair can open.
Thank you. So my question's to you, Niles. So, and actually, I guess to Joe as well. So, your suggestion would be to take out that one corner out of the cultural institutional and put it back to 3-acre lots. And did you say that that's 17 acres?
15.
It's 15, so it would be a total of 3 lots?
5.
Oh, goodness. All right, I need more coffee. Okay, so it would border the meadows, and then the other board of it would be Rockwood Reservation.
And Route 109 and Turkey Track Road.
And so, okay. And what would there actually be a benefit to taking it out? Or is it kind of just 6 of one, half dozen of the other?
I'm sure the daughters of Mr. Pruitt, Vernon Pruitt, would probably disagree. It's a positive taking it out of town center. But as Mr. Stevens mentioned, fully at least 60 to 70% of the site has slopes that are just unbuildable. I mean, they're not 3 to 1, they're 2 to 1 in some instances, and they're just very, very steep, and it would be reckless to allow development to occur on them. The area that is developable, and that's the area that adjoins the eastern boundary of Meadows of Wildwood, and that's primarily where all the fill went as part of the junkyard activity and then the cover that was provided at its closure. So, again, there's just a bit of history associated with the site that, from a perspective of the city, you want to make sure that it's safe before you authorize any use of it, particularly a residential use where people are there on extended periods of time.
So if we take it out of cultural institutional and we take it out of the town center, then does that make it more difficult for the city of Wildwood to oversee what goes on that property?
Well, even if they were to develop with 5 3-acre lots, there's still a platting process, and all of our environmental regulations would apply, the natural resource protection standards, tree preservation, grading, etc. We do have 2 environmental assessments that indicate it is suitable for residential use. And certainly that would be a hard point to argue that they're in error, because they're not. But from the department's perspective, there's always that question.
So we're talking about multifamily being a permitted use in the cultural institutional district. On that 8 to 10 acres, someone could offer a multifamily housing unit at the flat part on the top there, which would basically cut off your sunshine coming in from the east in the morning for the residents of the Meadows of Wildwood. And so I just think for future planning, the most appropriate use of that would be for single family residential. You're probably only going to get 3 to 5 homes in there anyway with the topography. That would be the lowest as far if it does develop. That would be the lowest density develop is to move it to the non-urban 3-acre density. So that's what I think is most appropriate. So that's why I made the motion. So.
Well, as Councilmember Stevens mentioned, if it weren't multiple family, which is a consideration, I think McBride and Son Homes project proposal of 35 on the 15 was probably the maximum because they filled it up pretty good. Well, again, I have a particular perception of a 3-acre lot or a 3-acre development. It's on a rural road. It's somewhat secluded, quiet. There's limited lighting. And so what you're buying is peace and quiet and no traffic noise, no lighting from parking lot areas, etc. So realistically speaking, it's probably not a prime 3-acre large lot subdivision location. But from certain other aspects, the less development on it, probably the better.
Couple of questions for you, Joe. This boundary line map, it's in Town Center now. That was the original plan, correct? This wasn't added 10 years ago of the T-cut?
No, it was added outside the normal 10-year update process, and it was done somewhere between around 2000, 2001.
And for clarification, too, people like me that have OCD kind of like nice, neat boundaries. So we have Rockwood Reservation to the south, and we got 109 to the east, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then last question for you. Outside of the McBride development plan in 17, has there been any other proposals for this parcel of land?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Joe, just a couple of very quick clarifications. Whatever happens with this parcel of land and the parcel that we were discussing earlier north of the Meadows, there's no future curb cuts or any connection to 109. All traffic would go out through Generations Drive, correct?
Well, the multiple family project is showing a curb cut out onto Route 109 about midway on the project's length. We've advised the developer that they need to talk with Missouri Department of Transportation. There's some site distance issues related to the hill and the grade, and it may be a right in, right out, but certainly we had questions about a bidirectional or multi-directional curb cut.
And then the second question I had is, if we did change it, as Niles suggests, to 3-acre lots, would there be any impact to the usability of the left-hand portion in terms of road access to the narrow portion of the site on the left, and by the time you get all the MSD requirements in and everything?
That's a very good question. As Ms. Broyle said, there is a developable portion, and it is, fortunately or unfortunately, toward the western portion of the property by the neck. And any access has to come from that small section on Turkey Track Road as far away from Route 109 as possible. And I don't know if that answers your question.
It's kind of a vague question, so.
No, I apologize. And again, if you wanted to restate it, I'll try better.
I guess my question is, like, as I look at more of the satellite photo of the site, the house is back up here, and by the time you get an access road in, how usable does that become for the community college to construct another building?
The standard right-of-way width will be 50 feet, so most of it will be absorbed, quite frankly, by the right-of-way. So it becomes less usable for anything else. So it does have a major impact then.
Thank you.
In 1998, none of the area, including Meadows of Wildwood, the Wildwood Family YMCA, the community college site, were not part of town center. We as team member Sedlak, we had a bit of OCD and we wanted to make logical boundaries.
And I just have a point of clarification. The property we're talking about is not owned by the community college. This is privately owned, correct?
Yes, Vernon Pruitt and his wife, now I believe his 2 daughters are the heirs.
Joe, so more specifically, why was this included in town center?
Again, as was described, we were faced with basically a decision. Do we allow independent care living units at densities much greater than 1 unit per every 3 acres across the non-urban zoned areas of Wildwood? The answer was an emphatic no. How do we make a project like Meadows of Wildwood work here? And we created the Cultural Institutional Overlay District and tied it all together by retirement communities, or in this case, age-restricted communities, YMCAs, community colleges, churches, elementary schools, etc. And we did a logical boundary, quite frankly. At that time, yes, ma'am.
Any major objection from the department if we would take this portion out of town center?
I appreciate Councilmember Stevens' motion, and as I mentioned in response to his answer, if there was one I would take out, this would probably be it, but the department wasn't recommending any changes to the overlay district.
I think I've heard you say in the past that whatever inclusions or exclusions occurred in the development of town center, you always at least had a conversation with the residents who would be affected. I also think I've heard you say that you've tried to take their wishes into strong account. You may not have followed all of them, I don't know. So here's my question. I think I'm asking Niles now. In many ways, I think this makes sense. And I'm personally, I like the 3-acre idea as opposed to the other. But, I mean, we're coming at this out of the blue, unless you personally called up the Pruitts and said, you know, I'm going to raise this tonight. Should we be having at least a conversation with the owners of the property before we take, and I mean this in a nice way, an arbitrary decision about their property? Does that make sense?
And just to answer that, I had already sent out one of the things that I wanted to have discussed at the next meeting, which I had sent in the email, is halting all T-cut recommendations until after the public input period is complete. So, and the final package is done. So I would certainly take into account, you know, any public input that would come, and if we want to make decisions afterward, you know, just for the changes that we did in the downtown district, that went straight to planning and zoning before we even had a chance to have the public input session and before we finished our final recommendations. So on this property as well, anything that we do, yeah, I would totally recommend having the public input, hearing from them, hearing from anybody who wanted to speak on it before we passed a final recommendation. This is just to get it into the plan, to have it presented to the public, you know, at the 2 public input, 2 to possibly 3 public input sessions. And as I don't think it's an arbitrary thing. From the beginning, I've been trying to shrink town center and possibly intensify the usage of it. I wanted to cut off the pond and district and everything. So I'm coming at this with the same desires from when we started. And so if this is an area that's on the boundary that can go from higher density to lesser density, I think it's a good thing for the city. I think it's a benefit to Wildwood. I think it's a benefit to the meadows of Wildwood for the people that live right next to it. Benefit for, just the environmental concerns about the dumping, that went on there. If you were looking to protect the environment and to protect green space, this is an easy way to make one little boundary adjustment that can help all those things. So that's why I made the motion, and we would certainly get the public input before the final recommendation is passed.
Right, and I think that mechanically we can't wait on. I think we can make a recommendation and even take some action with the understanding that at some point in time there will be input from the community regarding that, and we may alter it. Because I think as we go through each of these land classifications, if we determine that there's an area we should change, if we put the brakes on it until we get the input of the occupant or the owner, I think that will delay. I take a little bit of different view on what we did with Ackerley Place and Latitude
North
39, because we had a different mandate from planning and zoning with our responsibility towards that. Whereas our primary responsibility, as I understand it, regarding T-Cut, is that we come up with a bowl, if you will, of recommendations that will have the scrutiny of public input and also 2 layers of other levels of government before anything would happen. So I think, to your point, Steve, I think definitely those people should have a voice in it, but I don't know that we can make any progress if we stop everything, get input. We only meet once a month as it is. I could see this process taking multiple years. So I guess my preference would be to proceed with the understanding it's a recommendation, and when it becomes defined will be at a later date after the public input part. That's just the chair's opinion.
So Niles, why do you want to take the Pruitt property out but leave everything else intact in that district?
Well, I can tell you the reason the department wouldn't argue against taking any other properties out of the cultural institutional overlay district, because many of them are developed. And so in principle, you'd be creating nonconformities.
I understand. I was trying to get to his rationale.
Oh, okay. Well,
just as I explained, if you're looking at environmental concerns, which is important for the city of Wildwood, that was a dumping site. And so if it goes to a less dense development, you can alleviate some of those environmental concerns. When you look at just what I feel that residents in Wildwood want to see when it comes to development, they want less dense. This is a good example and a good way to cut out some density in and around the town center. It abuts Rockwood's reservation, which is 0 density.
I get why you want to take that portion out.
Yeah.
But why not, if you're going to take a portion out of this district, why not readjust the whole thing, is what I'm getting at.
Oh, I tried to readjust the whole thing. I tried to take off the whole pond historic district, so I've tried to do that as well. Because like I said, my goal would be to shrink town center and to intensify, the development in a smaller area. And so this is right on the borderline. This is an easy adjustment, I think, to take an area that's more dense to less dense, and it's more appropriate. So
yeah, and I mean, we hear over and over that residents want less density, which I'm 100% for. I would like to see some of the areas taken out of town center and town center become smaller and tighter. So I was just curious of your rationale for the entire area, not just a portion of the area.
And then we made a decision. Our recommendation. Very antsy.
Joe, I was looking at all of these different overlay maps, and I'm looking at the original one where we have the really good pictorial overview, and it differs a little bit from the one that is showing right now, because it shows that these houses on the Meadows of Wildwood back almost completely up to, what is that, Turkey Track Road?
Yes, ma'am.
And then on the blue one that's showing right here, it looks like you've got a strip of land there that's a decent size. So if what you said earlier, was it that anybody that built on that would have to access that property up there by Turkey Track Road? That's where it would have to be accessed?
Yes, unless they wanted to go to the east, access Route 109 and build the Golden Gate Bridge.
Okay, so as it stands right now, they could theoretically do multifamily, which then is going to wreak havoc on Generations Avenue traffic-wise.
There's ample reasons why this particular site is not similar to the 5-acre site that's owned by the community college. And access is one of those reasons that would justify a very hard scrutiny of any proposal for multiple family. So again, I want to caution, just because it says permitted or permitted by right, that's in the context of our zoning process, which does include, as you know, the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay. And you, go ahead.
Niles, when you asked before, you said, hey, what are the pros and cons, right? We're kind of hearing, hey, density is the biggest issue with this property. We don't want to cram a 15-story apartment complex on 1.5 acres and have all this stuff. With the way that 109 curves right there, there's no way planning and zoning would approve something like that, right, Joe? I mean, like Lindsay mentioned, in order to get a street through there, you're going to take up the whole lane between the back end of Wildwood, the houses at Wildwood, Meadows of Wildwood, and 109. So the street's got to come this way. So there's hardly any room. So I guess why not just leave it alone? I guess I'm confused. I'm all for not cramming 5,000 people in a 17-acre spot, but what does it matter?
Again, I would reiterate, the department in this particular instance isn't recommending any changes to the overlay district, the cultural institutional overlay district. At this stage, I think the checks and balances in our zoning process and the people involved on the commission and council would know if it's a good project or a bad project.
That's kind of my point, that even if we leave this thing alone, the P&Z is not going to allow something crazy to go in there. I mean, to me, that's the biggest concern that we're hearing. I guess it just would look weird having a small little parcel, and kind of to what Terry alluded to, there's no architectural control, then they can put whatever they want. So I don't think someone's going to come in there and build something crazy and P&Z is going to say, oh, it's a great idea. Let's throw 500 people in there.
So would the middle ground be the net, the neighborhood edge transition? This might be an appropriate spot to move it from cultural institutional to the net, which would allow, still have architectural review, still be one home for every 2 acres, right? Or 2 for 3. So 1.5. So, So if the motion's on the floor, if we want to vote on that, if we pass, it doesn't. If somebody wants to make another motion to change it,
I guess my question would be, do you want to change your original motion?
no, I would like to shrink the size of town center, so I'll
Okay,
stick
so we
with
have
that.
a
yeah.
motion on the floor from Mr. Stevens, seconded by Mr. McCutcheon. Ready for a roll call vote?
And to restate, this is to remove the Pruitt property from town center.
Member Curtis? Nay. Member Roten? Member Edwards?
No.
Member Brewer? No. Member Weiss? No. Member Risdale?
No.
Member Marion?
No.
Member Broyles? Chair Loyal?
No.
Member Sedlak?
No.
Member Cohen?
No.
Member Helfrey? No. Member Hoffman?
No.
Council Member Liaison McCutcheon?
No.
And Council Member Liaison Stevens?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, that motion
Motion
fails.
Thank you. Now, is there any other additional property either within the cultural institutional district that we would want to change the classification from? I think that was my original question when we had this idea developed. Or are there any other portions of town center from the committee standpoint that we think should be included? My understanding was that everyone felt comfortable with where it's at. So the next question would be to begin to go through the land use activities and ask the department if there's any. I know there's some condensation you'd like to see occur, or codification of it, or we want to go through those activities relative to cultural institution, and does anyone have any suggested changes?
With your permission, Mr. Chair, I did prepare a memorandum on the regulating plan. The first part of the memorandum summarized some of the changes the team has made to date. There are 4 major changes. But I also, with the permission of the chair, would like to note that there are 3 other locations, two of which were identified at our public input session at our November meeting. The first of those is the near Acres Drive area. As you know, we had, I think, all 7 or at least 6 of the 7 property owners that are served by Near Acres Drive attend. They had several spokespersons that identified their concerns about the future. And so that's an area that is currently designated Neighborhood Edge, was designated per the direction of the property owners at that time, 1998. But certainly you could hear in their voices the concerns they feel about the future relative to their property's value and saleability. The second location, the representative was Mary Kay Corsair. She is the property owner of this.
I have a question, Joe. And I know you're going to bring this around to where I understand it. Are we talking about all the classifications now, or?
Yes.
So changing the use activities, not the classifications?
Actually, the classifications, the uses would be a separate discussion.
Because I guess I was thinking that we would talk about uses within cultural institution.
Oh, we certainly can.
I'm trying to keep things in a nice little box regarding cultural institution, and then we move on to the neighborhood edge or workplace or neighborhood general, unless there's a desire to do it in a different fashion.
Well, again, we had sent out an invitation to property owners to come to our last meeting to give us input about potential changes to the regulating plan relative to their property or lots. We heard from several, so I was just trying to kind of bring that back.
Okay.
They did not talk about general areas. They were more specific to their individual lots and the impact the regulating plan has on them at this time.
Then how about if we go through the classification areas, and then we'll come back and visit all the activities? Is that acceptable?
I would like to hear about the 2 properties, the Corsair and then the Near Acres. I'd like to hear what was said about those.
And I think that's fine. I think let's do what you suggested, which is movement, any properties that may require movement into a different land use classification, and then we'll go back and talk about activities as a separate. That's fine. So please proceed. I apologize.
No, I apologize. I think I've confused the matter, and again, it wasn't my intent. It's just that I think we made a commitment to those property owners that did attend and spoke to the team that we wanted to hear what they were thinking about regulating plan designations. We can certainly talk about activities now and come back to that. So, okay.
So maybe we to wait till we get into the discussion, but because of the comments from the residents who live in near acres, I was thinking about asking that the new property that the city purchased would be an cultural institutional, since the city hall, it's actually city hall property. So should I do that now or wait?
I would defer to the chair, but it's...
Goes back to what we had talked about previously, including any addition. So we'll go back to visit that. So what you're suggesting is that the new 6 acres that were purchased be expanded to cultural institutional within town center.
Correct.
You make a motion to that effect?
I do.
A second?
And the rationale is because it's part of our government's property.
Could you repeat?
That the 6 acres that we just recently purchased that abuts to this property that we're sitting in be moved to cultural institutional district because it's owned by the city.
We have a second by Terry. Any discussion? Any objection from the department?
None at all, sir. I wish I
It
thought
wouldn't
of it.
hamper any of the ongoing plans that are presently under discussion.
No, the Cultural Institutional Overlay District will accommodate any park, public space, reserve, or otherwise open space designation.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Could you just point to, I know where the acres are, but could you point to them on the map? Okay. The lines in between are very thick.
No further discussion? Can we get a roll call vote on the motion?
Member Curtis?
Yes.
Member Roten?
Yes.
Member Edwards?
Yes.
Member Brewer?
Yes.
Member Weiss?
Yes.
Member Risdale?
Yes.
Member Marion?
Yes.
Member Broyles?
Yes.
Chair Loyal?
Yes.
Member Sedlak?
Yes.
Member Cohen?
Yes.
Member Helfrey?
Yes.
Member Hoffman?
Yes.
Councilmember Liaison McCutcheon?
Yes.
Councilmember Liaison Stevens? Motion is approved.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chair, and pardon me creating some confusion. So again, at our last meeting, we had representatives from 2 locations come and speak to the team about the regulating plan, future land use, and their concerns. The first, as mentioned, was Near Acres. And again, their concern was not verbalized as we want to change. Their concern was more verbalized as we're not sure what this all means and things are changing around us. So there, in the opinion of the department, needs to be a discussion. Do we elevate their land use category so as they can stay residential as long as they should choose, but if they were to sell, is it just single family detached as shown now? Or is it multiple family under neighborhood general? Is it workplace, commercial, or downtown? So that's the crux of what the department heard, although again, none of the speakers specifically identified a category they would prefer or a land use designation they would prefer. The That may be a much, much better summary than I just provided.
We can't hear you because you're leaning back, and so I have no idea what you just said.
Okay.
Could you use your microphone, please?
Yep. So what I said was, if I remember the discussion correctly, it wasn't about changing the land use so they could get more money for their property in the future. It was a discussion about being communicated to and understanding what's happening and going on around them. So based on that, and in support of not increasing the density for those properties for the sake of increasing the density, it's more of a communication issue and it's less a land use issue, in my opinion. Thank you.
Niles?
Yes, I had a meeting with the residents in Nair Acres as well at Ms. Christensen's home, and most of them were there. And what I had discussed with them is that as far as future use for that, land, the most appropriate use is single-family detached dwellings in that area. Probably the best thing we could do, if you're, looking as far as, what would help them out the most, would be the improvements to the street network in and around there, which would give better access up and down Etherton Road. So if Etherton Road project is currently, we just moved that at council last night. We moved that project up from 2024 construction to 2023. But as I think that the main thing, they were confused, and not really confused, but they just had questions on, are you going to change this? Or what changes are you going to make? And so I think that was the crux of what I got. I had tried to reassure them that as far as their properties go, residential is the most appropriate use. And also, they were all pretty tight-knit group, and from what I got out of it, if any of them decided to sell, they would kind of want to make it a group effort, and they wouldn't want to have residential and commercial properties, and one person decides to sell out to a commercial, or one person decides to sell out to multifamily. So keeping it all the same category and the same development style, I think, would be the most appropriate one for that area, and the best way to keep them a cohesive unit, which they seem to be. They all got along. They all showed up for the meeting and everything. So, just my comments.
Yeah. So, Nearest Acre Drive, that's a private street.
Correct.
So he's talking about upgrading it.
Etherton Road.
Etherton Road, not Nearest Acre. Okay. So what I got out of their questions was that they were concerned about basically what was surrounding their property, not necessarily their property. So I think they were concerned because on the one side you've got workplace, and then on the other side you've got downtown. And so I think that was more of the concern versus what are you going to do with us? I mean, I think they were more concerned about what was going on around them and them being placed in the middle of it, is what I heard. And so, I mean, the only thing, we can't change Manchester Road. It already has commercial buildings on it. There's nothing we can do about that. We could change the area around Crestview Drive and make it neighborhood edge all the way up to 100. And so that would give a bigger block should they decide, and it would give us more houses in the area. And then that would give them, the whole area that surrounds them then would be same designation as they are, because we can't change what's already happened, like you said earlier, for cultural institutional. We can't change that. We can't change the commercial portion on Manchester Road. So that was my thought based on what I heard them say, because I thought they were more concerned about what was going on around them than actually. Were you in on a meeting with them, Joe? Because I know the mayor was going to try to hold a meeting. Did you?
We were not able to schedule it. The residents all could attend, but the schedules more so than me, I couldn't pull it all together. But whatever we decide here, I think we should go back to them and certainly have it tested, so to speak, and see what their impressions are.
Yeah, I definitely like to have a conversation with them because about maybe changing the designation around Crestview Drive, because that's what I heard was here they are in the middle and then they've got 3 other zonings around them. So what's going to happen with them? So I think if you made a bigger block for housing, then that may give them some more comfort area. But we'd have to ask them that question. That's what I heard.
Mr. Chair, if I may. Yes, please. Well, again, looking at our recommendations relating to the street network map, Etherton Road is number 2 on the list of priorities. So we have, as a team, prioritized that very high. Secondly, the team just changed 2 of the abutting properties to near acre lots by doing the cultural institutional overlay district versus downtown. The team has also basically established a residential pattern on the southeast corner of Crestview Drive and Etherton Road, which leaves 1 remaining parcel of ground between the dark brown and the now cultural institutional overlay district that's designated downtown that has a contiguous boundary with near acres. So that may be a parcel we would want to consider for change.
Is that the Holiday property? Is that?
Yes, sir.
Is that what you're
Exactly.
talking about? I would.
General.
I make a motion to make that property neighborhood general. Or not?
Joe, what would your recommendation be for that singular property?
I would like to take some time and review it. Obviously, you're providing direction. I would be cautious to make changes. The cultural institutional overlay district change to our 2 properties was appropriate because they were purchased for public space purposes. They shouldn't be developed for anything else, and it works. There are some ramifications because, as we know, we talked at great length about if you change on one side of the street, what do you do on the other side of the street? So I guess I'd just like to have a conversation maybe with Julian Jacquin, our economic development manager, Terry, and obviously the property owners and see what they're thinking. So I'd like to have a little time on that. If the direction is you want me to explore that, that can be done and we can talk about it in January.
I think team member Sedek wants to withdraw his motion.
Yeah, Joe, again, my OCD, that color bothered me, so I just wanted to make it all
I
one nice,
withdraw my
neat.
second.
I didn't realize
So,
all the ramifications,
Deborah?
so I will withdraw the motion if that's all right with everybody.
Yeah, I'd appreciate if you take a look at making it neighborhood edge.
We can look at both neighborhood edge and neighborhood general, as was noted by team member Sedley.
I would just like for you to look and see what your department thinks is most appropriate and let us know.
Right, and you had indicated that's
Thanks.
what you wanted to think about.
Yes, if I could just
You're the
get a month's
experts.
time, I think we could.
Elizabeth?
Joe, could you use this? Because I think there's plenty of people in the audience. It's difficult to see. Could you show the audience?
So this is the particular property we're discussing now, this rectangle that's 3 acres in size. The team just changed these 2, collectively 6 acres, into cultural institutional overlay district. And then here are the near acre properties, so to speak.
If we, for the purposes, we're getting close, we're 5 minutes out from our scheduled end time. For the purposes of the next meeting, can we get some clarification on what the people, if there is a desire from the folks that live in near acres, any alterations there, as well as your recommendations for you said it's a Holiday property? The Holiday property. And then was the other one you wanted to chat about was Corbett Corsair? Or is that the only additional one for this evening?
That was the only other one that was identified during public comment. And I thought we as a team and staff were obliged to at least respond to those that attended the meeting and provided public comment.
And I guess, because I'm assuming they're located within the red classifications there. And
Part
we would run into
red.
the same- If we change that, we'd run into the same situation that we're discussing regarding Crestview Drive, with both sides having different classifications.
My suggestion is to take it all the way out to 100.
And I will investigate that as well. I'll look at this as a neighborhood edge. This is neighborhood general. The rest, basically from here over being downtown. So I'll do several different scenarios to let you know what it looks like from relative boundaries, and then what the ramifications are.
Thank you. Joe, can you just refresh our memory on what the owner of the workplace property, what she wanted, what her concerns were and what her wishes were? Please.
Yes. Up until 2010, that property was a combination of workplace and neighborhood general. And the city authorized over 250 condominium units on this property, plus 2 commercial buildings here. In 2010, after the zoning had been in place, the group of volunteers recommended the workplace stay, but the neighborhood general be neighborhood edge to offset concerns from near acres, like uses on either side, so to speak. What that ultimately did is the owner of the property could not find a development entity to preserve her vested rights, and so eventually her zoning became void, and now that project can't be built. And so she's trying to retain the project that was originally approved by the city back in 2007 or 2008. Yes. Just this, yes, this area right through here.
So does the city have any,
Road frontage as well?
Yeah. Pardon? Yes.
does the city have any recommendation for that?
Well, the department through time has tried to preserve her vested right because, again, there was an interest in multiple family there. Ultimately, though, every multiple family developer seemed to not find the equation to make it work. So in this particular instance, the department probably has more concerns about the workplace than the neighborhood edge. We're just not seeing the interest or demand, and in some regards, it's just a question of how much workplace works along Manchester Road.
In my opinion, once you get done with the Manchester Road improvements, it seems to me that is a large area that can be commercial. And if we are changing the zoning on the downtown properties on Crestview, which I don't necessarily disagree with, I don't know, what else would you put along Manchester Road other than workplace?
Certainly institutional uses, and principally what I've been asked about more so than anything is just bringing multiple family up to the street, not commercial. But that's why we're here talking about it. The department doesn't have an opinion yet, or would provide an opinion. It wants to hear from the team. That's the process. And
Okay, so then let's go back to the traffic for a second. If for the sake of this conversation, we said, okay, yeah, let's put the multifamily all the way back up to Manchester Road. How does that affect the traffic for Manchester Road after the improvements have been done? Would Manchester Road be able to sustain that?
the design of Manchester Road can accommodate our most intense land use pattern. Because again, a well-designed two-lane road with appropriate turn bays, on-street parking, pedestrian and bike facilities can flow it will flow very well. The question becomes like any, we have a traffic control here and a roundabout. We have a four-way stop here. ultimately, the question will be, do we need a roundabout at Etherton Road or some other type of traffic control?
As far as the properties along Crestview Drive that are commercial, if we're going to do a village green next to City Hall, is there any planning? Would you ever do a village green in the middle of a neighborhood? I mean, the village green, in my view, in my thinking, would be surrounded by commercial properties. It's there to support, bringing people in. People have a chance to linger and stick around. You have restaurants or shopping or other uses. You wouldn't build your concert venue or your, where you have your farmers markets or anything else right in the middle of a neighborhood. So I just don't see why you would change all those properties on Crestview Drive to neighborhood edge or even neighborhood general. But that's just my view. One of the things I did want to bring up, though, is since we've already done the airspace in the downtown district, I do think that it would be very appropriate to make the change to allow for downtown district to be first floor commercial with neighborhood general in the airspace. And that would give you an opportunity, or give developers an opportunity, to add more high density or more multifamily, units, while still preserving the plan to have a commercial space around the Village Green area. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on that or not, but
My answer to that plan is that if you leave that neighborhood, or you make that neighborhood edge, the Village Green would then be the neighborhood park. And then, we have a community park that we have spent a lot of money on that was supposed to be a gathering place for the community. So that the types of things like concerts and, all those kinds of things can be done in community park. It doesn't have to be in town center. You could still use that for facilities, but we're also going to run to it if we try to make it an active space. We've already got residents living there, and that's going to be an issue. We've got residents right next to where our 6 acres is right now. So you're going to have to deal with how is that going to impact those neighbors that we already have there. So you're looking at a neighbor issue and a noise issue any which way you go with the Village Green right there. That's my comments.
I would like to postpone our additional discussion regarding this until the next meeting. I think we have a good handle on where we're going to run into a little bit of roadblocks and discussion and take more time. So I will ask the department to kind of summarize that and give us some guidance. I'd like to move to the final session of public comments, if we have any cards, Barry.
Barry Rinderknecht.
Thank you. I appreciate you hearing all the people from the Meadows of Wildwood. I'm Barry Rinderknecht, and I live in the in the Meadows of Wildwood subdivision. And I also want to thank all the Wildwood people Meadows of Wildwood people who were here before, and now most of them vacated. We still have a few that are here. And one of our councilmen, John Gragnani, is here. We invited him to come and hear about some of the information that's been going on. Now, the 2 previous speakers, we all met, and then we wrote separately, but we all pretty much had the same thing to say. So let's just pretend that people are now tuning in to this meeting, and this might be kind of like a recap, okay? And I won't take up too much more time. As I said, my name is Barry Rinderknecht, and I've lived here. My wife and I have lived here in the Wildwood area since 1988. I'm currently residing at 161 Meadows of Wildwood Boulevard in Town Center, Ward 1. I thank the committee members, Mr. Vunich and staff, for the the committee members here for your extensive work that you have conscientiously accomplished in order to create a pleasant and well-planned community that we all enjoy. I'm speaking with you tonight to share two concerns for your consideration to recommend to the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. The first item deals with the exceeding capacity and extended traffic wait times and safety issues that exist on Generations Drive and New College Avenue when exiting onto Highway 109. With the volume of vehicles exiting the community college, the YMCA, Wildwood Square, and the Meadows of Wildwood, at times there are near fender benders and definite frustration amongst the drivers trying to vacate the area in a timely manner. This issue was shared at the Mayor's Coffee in November 2019, and the response from the Wildwood official was to contact MoDOT and request a timing change of the intersection lights. That might help, but this would not be a complete solution. Seems to me that the crawling ant-like column formation of traffic would receive relief by extending Generations Drive from New College Avenue to Manchester Road. Please consider this suggestion in your recommendation report to the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Wildwood Council. One thing that I didn't put in the written response, but right here, one thing that might help until we get the extension going is to educate the college students. I'm a retired educator, high school level, but I like students. I don't want to hate them, but I understand them and how they want to drive, and nothing's going to happen to them. So a lot of times when you are driving into the Meadows, I think that direction is going south, they think, although they can't see me, I'm 70 years old, they think I'm a college student coming to class. So they think I want to make a right, so they will just disregard the fact that I could be going straight back to my home, and or they want to beat me before I get to that intersection, and so they've jetted out quite often. Once again, I'm trying to understand them and want to live peacefully with them. So I'm not here to complain about the students so much, just I appreciate you having this concern to consider with all the plans you're making for the various areas in town center. Now, my second issue deals with Wildwood's regulating plan and land use activities for the existing land use classification. I would advocate to focus your emphasis on maintaining the designation of the cultural institutional last two remaining acreages in town center. The Meadows community residents chose to reside in this area because of amenities such as having a YMCA, a college, commerce, and green space. Your consideration for retaining as much area for parks and open spaces, public and private areas, scenic views, and wildlife refuges need to remain the same for land use activities to benefit all Wildwood residents, not just the people in town center. And this would also be for outside people to come and visit this area, maybe spend some money after walking in some of the green spaces and what have you that are in town center. As I have heard stated before, these are features of this area that make Wildwood unique. Please consider making your recommendation to favor the factors that establish us to be known as Wildwood, not a place that could become non-wood. Okay, thank you very much. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
So I understand all the concerns that you all have about the traffic and all that. So can you take a look, Joe, and see if there's any way to accomplish this without making it a cut through? Because that's my concern, is that it's going to become a cut through and it's going to create more traffic rather than less traffic. Thank you.
Any additional comments from the team? Yes, Lindsay.
Is that a three-way stop, Joe, at the community college?
No, it's not. The stop requirement is to the college students leaving, and Generations Avenue is free flow. So
Would a three-way stop potentially help improve safety at that intersection, if not alleviating the traffic?
I was going to ask Mr. Brown about that. Obviously, there may be some concerns about some stacking issues, but it'd certainly be worth exploring.
Mr. Sedlak.
Joe, also with the couple of things they met was the timing change of that light. Is there a way to find out from the community college when their high traffic volume is? I realize it's not a high school that you have at 7 a.m. and you have at 3 p.m. because there's different classes. But I notice when I go over to that plaza for lunch, sometimes 1 o'clock, sometimes it's 11, sometimes there's some high volume that perhaps you could have a timing change at those specific high density times.
We'll see what we can find out and bring that information back to the team.
Councilman Grignon, you had a comment?
Yes, sir. There is much that people don't know. The issue was brought up to the Public Safety Board a while back. In fact, a delegation from Meadows of Wildwood came to the Board of Public Safety about that very intersection at the college and Generations Drive, and a proposal for a three-way stop was made for that. The people from the Meadows of Wildwood decided they didn't want it. They were concerned that they would disregard the stop sign anyway, and they're probably right. The students would. So they would stop, but the students probably wouldn't stop. So we forewent putting the three-way stop there for the time being. Is it still an option? I don't know. Here's the problem with putting up stop signs or even speed bumps. You have to enforce things, and that's always a problem. The question is, who will enforce it? The college has no impetus to really enforce it, and our police department can't be there 24 hours a day. So if you've got a solution to that problem, I'm all ears.
Just a couple comments before we adjourn regarding the agenda for January. I would like to see the recommendations from Councilman Stevens placed on the agenda in the appropriate location. And realistically, I think Mr. Brown, we perhaps should schedule for not January, just based on the free discussion, timely discussion, and perhaps February for us to revisit the priorities of our traffic, unless someone would have an objection. Okay.
Mr. Chair, would you like the answers to some of the questions that were posed tonight regarding Generations Avenue at January, or wait till February?
If we're going to revisit them in February, I think it may be, my opinion is maybe more, instead of doing it twice or forgetting that I would probably forget that we had discussed it. So I would think perhaps it'd be tied together as one nice package regarding the traffic way, if that's possible.
That's fine. Yeah, we'd be glad to do it in February when Mr. Brown is here as well.
Great. Any other comments? Mr. Stevens?
Just a point of for the Meadows of Wildwood residents, when it comes to traffic safety, the Wildwood Police Department is very responsive to requests for patrols done at certain times. So if you want them there at a certain time, or if you have specific vehicles that you've noticed that were causing problems, they will look out for those as well. So if there's any specifics on time or people, please let them know, and they will be glad to get out there and to look into that for you.
There's also a campus, they're not police, but there's a campus vehicle, and maybe that they could monitor those high volume exits from, that's when it's most dangerous, is the exit time. And every semester, the classes are going to change. the timing on the classes are going to change, and that's hard to keep up with. But I would think that maybe that person could assist. Another thing, I believe that stop sign is back further. And if that stop sign could be up a little further, if they don't cut that grass until a year from now, that might be helpful, because then you can see them as you drive south, and they can see you.
I was going to have Mr. Brown take a look at the entire intersection. First, the sign you mentioned as a site obstruction, and now the stop sign. So we'll take a look at it all.
Okay, thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Thanks to everyone's participation. Yes,
Do we have a date for January's meeting?
14th.
Thank you.
And Terry and I would like to wish you the best of the holiday season.
Thank you also.